Hi everyone, Howdy McCoskey coming to you again with what's going to be a very long video. I don't know how long it's going to be yet, but I've got about 20 pages of notes, so it's going to take us a while to get through what is an unbelievably important and key topic. Not just from the standpoint of our balance individually as people, but our balance individually as groups and in society, and in fact, the whole planet. And that is the understanding of the ancient principle of masculinity and femininity. And it's the principle of the yin and the yang, right? The principle of how duality can function in the dream, how duality is able to stay dual, yet cooperate with each other so that it balances and harmonizes each other, that they don't stay separate, that they're able to merge and cooperate in a very specific way that creates the balance of this world. I'm not examining this from a modern psychological perspective, from some modern sociological perspective. I actually don't give a shit about that. We're going to be looking at the ancient way of seeing this. How did the ancient Maya, how did the ancient Egyptians, how did the ancient people of India or China, or the ancient shamans of the world see these principles in us individually? How did they see them within the world? And how was these ideas important not only in our own personal health and well-being, but in the well-being of all society and the whole planet? So I know this topic will probably create a lot of very strong opinions. It's going to probably have a lot of people very upset with me, actually, because I'm going to say things they may not like. But I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here to try to share ancient knowledge. And what you do with that ancient knowledge is your own decision. But before you turn this off or move into a lot of critical thinking, just step back and say, what world would you like to live in? A world where there's balance and harmony and most people seem to live in a healthy, calm, integrated way? Or the world you have right now? A world of increasing insanity. And I don't just mean what's happening right now. I mean, look back 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, 50 years, 60 years. The world's been insane for a long time. And this inability of people to know and integrate masculinity and femininity is a foundation root of why things are so mistaken. And it's not about one is better than the other. It's about understanding that there's a yin and there's a yang, and that they each have a role and they each have a way of integrating with each other. And the yin at times becomes yang, and the yang at times becomes yin, right? The whole process of the I Ching, the great oracle of ancient Asia, which is when you throw it, some lines are yin, some lines are yang, some lines are changing. Some start as yin, they move to yang. Some are yang, they move to yin. And this alters and moves and causes flow, as opposed to static. All is yin, all is yang. So I originally began the writings and the work on this like 10 or 15 years ago. And they've been sitting in a folder for a long time. I haven't really done much with them. And it wasn't until a couple of months ago I watched a video by Bjorn Bull Hansen, a really interesting guy, and he was talking a lot about masculinity and the loss of it in our world. And as I was watching it, I realized, but he never defined masculinity. He never defined femininity. And he never gave detail into, well, how do they interplay? How do they work together? And I realized, well, that's what I made research on for a long, long time. So I think given the situation of our world, this is a really good time to present all that to you. And again, I'm not saying that Bjorn doesn't know what they are. I'm sure he does. He seems like a really interesting guy. He's got 400,000 followers. So, some people like obviously what he has to say. Links below. Everything I mentioned today, I'll link below so you can see it and go see these things yourself. But I just felt like this was a good push to get the notes out of my folder and share them with you and share this ancient knowledge, because most probably realize that the feminine has been under attack for hundreds and thousands of years, and that a high percentage of what might be called true feminine energy has been squeezed out of this reality. But not as many are realizing that masculinity is now what's under attack, and has been under attack for the last 30 or 40 years, and it's being squeezed out of society. And we're getting to a point where we now hardly have either. And the loss of both is beyond dangerous for the world of where we are now compared to where we used to be and compared to where we're going. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of this research, and the research comes from a lot of different topics, one of which was Robert Bly, who wrote Iron John. And it was from him that I started digging into the old fairy tales. I was actually going to write a book on how masculine and feminine are displayed in various fairy tales from all over the world, but I just never got to finishing that research. His book is in my house. It's just we're in the process of getting ready to move, and so it's in a box right now, and I couldn't find it. Some others I'll be going into is guys like this guy, David Dida, The Way of the Superior Man, and he's got some very interesting stuff. He has a great knowledge of male purpose and what that means. There's this guy, Tejan Maras, who was kind of a Carlos Castaneda wannabe, and wrote basically just books expanding everything Castaneda said, except in one area, which was the masculine and the feminine. Castaneda hardly ever spoke about it, but Maras wrote a couple of books that were about the cooperation of and understanding when you can have, it's like polarity, right? When you can have a true north and a true south, those magnets that becomes a magnet. And similar to Richard Rose, because Rose would have had a tremendous amount to say on this. I looked through his writings. I couldn't find much directly on the topic, but he was very clear on betweenness as being this gap that you would find between two magnets, where the magnets are at the perfect strength and the perfect distance apart. The middle gap becomes a place of power. And if you think of masculine and feminine in those ways, those are two of the most powerful operations we have in the dream. And when a true male and a true female, true masculinity and true femininity can be in the right level and the right balance and the right distance, you might say, from each other symbolically, what's produced in the middle is this powerful gap of betweenness, this gap of power. Another interesting guy to look at is this one, Martin Prechtel. This is Secrets of the Talking Jaguar, but I think the book where he goes through the initiation ceremonies of the Maya is Honey in the Heart, I believe is the name of the book. Again, all links below. And he was one of the last people to be able to live the ancient teachings. He was still living in a village in Guatemala where the ancient world was still going on into the 1980s, just at the time when the modern businessmen and the Christian missionaries and everyone else came in to basically kill the village. And anyone who wanted to keep the old ways were just butchered, and the modern world pushed on them. But he was able to escape. It's a long story, but he escaped with this knowledge to share the ancient wisdom, one of which was the initiation ceremonies of the ancient Maya, which had been continuing right up to this day. And the way having those initiations allowed us to connect with nature in a way beyond our normal understanding. I'll be looking at some other books, things like the book Boy Crisis, which is interesting. A female writer I just read a couple of days ago, Anna Rova. I was looking for some really good things on femininity, and she had an outstanding article called something about feminine power. And so I want to share some of what she wrote, because it's also really important, because you can't just talk about masculinity without femininity. You can't talk about femininity without masculinity. They interplay, they balance, and you need to discuss both to try to understand any one of them, because they're not. You can't just discuss yin without yang. Another is Jack Donovan, who has some interesting things to say and what I think some uninteresting things to say. And so I want to share a lot of this research with you, and I want to share my own quest for masculinity, my own quest for, as well, understanding the inner feminine, and how that's going and how challenging that's been for me, and reasons why it's been so challenging. That's a really important thing to make sure we have on the table early, is that even though I'm a male and my predensity, you might say, is to a masculine core, that doesn't mean I don't have an inner female. And an inner female has an inner male. And I think that's one place where a lot of the modern researchers and discussions on this topic, they focus only on one or the other, and they forget that you have both. One will be, of course, predominant, but the whole point of the balance of masculine and feminine is within us. That it's this ability to have them strong and healthy and balanced and cooperating within, and that gets mirrored in the external world. The more you can strengthen and understand them and balance those parts, you can do that to the external world. As a male, my masculinity has a really good opportunity to be taught and shared by other males. My inner femininity can't really be taught by females, but it can be mirrored by other females, or mirrored by feminine aspects of the world. So you might say for example, the health of my inner female will be mirrored by the health of you might say, the health of the femininity around me. The more healthy it is, the more healthy the femininity will be around me. The sicker it is, the sicker the femininity will be around. I want to say sicker, but that's not the right word. The more unbalanced it would be. That's the best word, unbalanced. And the same would be for a female, right? The female needs to use the external males in their world to see what their inner female is like, or their inner male is doing. And so this is an important thing of understanding both are within ourselves, and what one is our predensity. One can be taught, one needs to be shown through a mirror. And I mean, I don't think there's any area of modern society, when you really think about it, that's more messed up than this interaction of gender. It's so messed up, people don't even really know it's messed up. Again, just ask a person. Ask a person you think is pretty smart in general, has a pretty good intellectual knowledge of things, and ask them, what actually is masculinity? What is femininity? Can you define it for me? And the answers are going to be very poor generally. And they might discuss moral issues or certain values you're supposed to have, or generic concepts, but it's not going to be like you can take concrete, like, yeah, this person actually, they know what it is. You're going to find that most people don't. And that's kind of, when you think about it, beyond insane. That should be one of the easiest things humans should know. Some of the cores of who we are as a creature, you would think that would be the easiest things to be taught. And it's no surprise that as reality was moving from one of health and natural connection to the one of modern control we have now, one of the first steps is the destruction of gender and the bond of how they interact together. Makes complete sense. I mean, there's so many what you would call weak males now, and there's so many masculine females now. True males still exist. They're not that hard to find, actually. True females, feminine females exist. They're not that easy to find either. And before we blame anybody or blame ourselves, first thing to ask, for example, did any of these males have true males as fathers, as role models? True males, at least in their life, that they could mirror? The answer is probably no. Did these females have a true feminine mentor, a true feminine mother who could be a role model and a mentor for them? No, probably not. And then you add the tremendous amount of children that are abused on a yearly basis. And the percentage will probably shock you if you could actually know what the real percentage is. It's extremely high. So they have, coming from a world of abuse and trauma, coming from a world of no role models, to properly teach these skills, as of course the parents didn't have role models from their parents either. And this is how it happens. The lack of knowledge gets passed down generation to generation to generation. The mess gets passed generation to generation. It's one of the reasons I chose not to have children, was because I realized this passing down of, my father was a psychopath, and I'll talk a bit about what that's like to try to gain some sort of masculine knowledge with a masculine psychopath as a role model. But his father was, from the little I know, was probably also a psychopath. So this is just getting passed on and passed on and passed on. Or maybe not, maybe he wasn't a psychopath. He was more of just a narcissist, I guess. And so once I started realizing all this and realized I want that to stop here. It's going to stop with my generation. This passing on is going to stop. And so unless I could guarantee 100% none of what's comes from my generational ancestral chain is going to get passed on to children I have, my choice was not to have children then, because I don't want to pass on what's behind me to another generation. If whatever mess we'll have, it's going to stop here. And that's an important aspect. I think until it's actually cleaned at a real deep level, it's just going to keep getting passed on. And so let's go into a little more of the background on this, and then let's get into the real detail. So as I mentioned, the ancient feminine has been the first to have been destroyed, and it's been slowly over the last 200 to 2,000 years, partially by setting up a patriarchal control system of government, commerce, and religion. I mean, remember, in Christianity, for most of 2,000 years, women couldn't be priests. Women, for many years, for a long part of it, weren't allowed to read the Bible. They weren't considered human enough to be able to actually read the Bible themselves. When you look at the way society works, the way commerce works, that's been structured in a male boxed way, and you had to be a masculine type action in order to involve yourself in it. So as more and more women began to move into the workforce in the last 50 years, in order to function properly and in order to fit into the way the system is, they had to become masculine. That's just the truth of the matter. So women became, as they entered the workforce, automatically masculinized. But now we're seeing the masculine being pulled out of society. It's being removed from sports. It's being removed from how men are supposed to act in relationships. And of course, that's not saying that the masculinity up to this point has been healthy. Most of the masculinity we've seen in modern society is very unhealthy. It's a very distorted type of maleness that we'll get into that actually just tries to control and dominate, as opposed to interact harmoniously and balance. And by now, the concept of what a male is and what a female is, what masculine and feminine is it's basically gone from our world and been so corrupted by modern conditioning that we have to look to the ancients to even have any hope of understanding what it is. Because to the ancient world, one of the absolute most important parts of their entire teaching was for the village to teach young boys to understand what masculinity is and what roles are, what the roles and expectations are of their life, and for young women to know what it means to become female, to become feminine. You have to start with where you are. I mean, there's no point starting right away to get a boy to work on his inner feminine until he's got his inner masculine figured out. That just makes sense. There's no point in getting a female to start working on her masculine right away, like fitting into the world when she's 6 years old. She's got to start learning. She's got to get in touch with her core femininity first. And again, I didn't have any kind of proper initiation like these ancients. I would have loved to have had one of these initiation ceremonies, and with a very screwed up parental role model. It's no surprise that my life became quite a mess once I had to start moving from you might say, being a boy into being a young man. You know, once you have the few who know my story, once I took a tremendous amount of psychological abuse as a child, some physical abuse at times, but mostly it was psychological. It was trying to beat down the abilities I had and the thinking that I had, because of course I would make my father look bad by being smarter than him, by being more alert than him, being more aware than him. Then, just as I was moving into young manhood, I had all of my money stolen by him. And so just as I'm trying to finish university and begin setting those foundations, because that's the time of your life you begin to set your foundations in the world. You're kind of, okay, I know who I am, I know where I want to be, I know what I want to start doing, and I'm going to start beginning my process. But the rug was pulled out under my feet. And in some cases, this really important, when I really needed a good role model instead to start saying, okay, here's where you are in life, here's some of your choices, what is it you want to do, what are the kind of things you are thinking of moving in towards now with your university degree, how do you want to use that, how do you want to, instead I just had my role model symbolically kick me in the face, right? So that's not a good way of building yourself, in this case, a masculine way of rooting yourself into reality. Then a few years after that, I had an ex-girlfriend murdered by the guy she was with, and so again, this not only was really hurting the masculine core, but it was also showing me the sickness of masculinity in society, when these kind of things that a father was going to do to a child and what someone in a relationship was going to do to someone else in a relationship. Murdering someone is about as intense a thing as you can do. And again, I'm not blaming either of these people. I'm not carrying, I don't want to blame them for anything. Life choices, people make choices and they have to live with their choices. But they were already, I could see, not only making my life difficult, but at the same time they were, without me knowing it, unraveling these cores of masculinity and femininity and trying to determine what they are and what they aren't. So, once you begin to see that an entire village or an entire society in the ancient world put a lot of their continued functioning on this initiation and teaching. I mean, imagine a video like this would never have to be done 3,000 years ago. Imagine me going into an ancient Iroquois village or a Viking village to discuss what being masculine and feminine means. The village would laugh at me. They would think I'm insane. It would be like me trying to show them a tree. Like, oh, look, I want to show you a tree. Yeah, we know. What are you talking about? But now we're in a world where in this field, someone has to come along and say, this is actually a tree. Oh, wow. We've always thought it's a rock. That's where we're at. And so again, it's like, it's amazing. And this was, and the whole concept of masculine and feminine was built into the language. It was built into the language itself. So it still exists in a few modern languages like French, Spanish. There's a masculine and a feminine. But people they just treat it as another annoyance of the language. They don't actually say, why is that in the language? Why was the language created in that way? And Martin Prechtel, in Secrets of the Talking Jaguar, was discussing the importance of the language and the gender in the language in Mayan, in the ancient Mayan language. And it was important if a word was masculine or feminine, because what it was telling you, for example, if it was a task, it was telling you what part of your being you had to use in order to perform that task in balance and in harmony, so that you and the task itself would be equal. So if, for example, the task I think when he gave was collecting water. So collecting water was considered a feminine activity. That doesn't mean only girls or women could collect water. What it meant is you had to collect water in a feminine way. So I could go and collect water, or for example, I like to pick berries. Picking berries is a feminine would be a feminine task from the standpoint of the word, of the way you have to do it. And I've noticed that over the years, when I was an average berry picker and had trouble finding enough berries or picking them well or properly, I was doing it in a masculine thinking kind of way. And over the years, as I've shifted to a much more receptive way, I let the berries in the area talk to me rather than me tell the berries that you might say where I'm going to pick and how I'm going to do it. I become more receptive to it and I listen to the berries, and now I find berries everywhere I go. And so this is a really good example. It's that into the ancient languages, this was not done for some way of just making the language difficult for people. This was done so that they could understand. This is a masculine task. So if a female is going to do it, you have to access your inner masculine and do it in a masculine way. But when the task is over, as a female, stop being masculine, switch back to your feminine core. Otherwise, you'll get trapped in it. If I go out and pick berries and I do it in a feminine way, the point being is when I get home, I need to switch out of that and try to switch back into a more masculine core. This is where some modern writers on this subject get themselves quite mixed up, in that they expect you to stay, if you're a male, you should be masculine all the time, and if it looks like you're moving into a feminine place, you're just being not masculine enough. No, you have to work with both of those areas. You strengthen both cores of your being, because in the ancient world, the language is indicating there's times you're going to need to be masculine, there's times you're going to need to be feminine, and you have to have a healthy inner part that can do both. Today we just have a simple growing up ceremony, simply because a boy or girl hits 14 or 16 and they have some little small ceremony. Usually give them some money and say, yep, you're a man or a woman now, off you go. But the problem is those children never really become adults. Just because they had some modern little ceremony doesn't mean anything actually changed within them. So that's why you see the 50-year-old adult is still the 12-year-old child with just 38 more years of experience. And you'll see this very clearly. If you really start to watch people and examine the people you know from a little bit of distance, you will find out what year their growth stopped. They might be 50 years old, but are they really 10? Are they 12? Are they 14? Are they 18? Some people actually get to about 18 or 20 sometimes before they actually shut down. There's very, very few that would be classified as a true adult. That's 45, 50 years old, and you can look at them and say, this is an adult. This is someone who has not only understood childhood and learned from it, they made the adjustment to go from child to adult. And generally that wouldn't have been only by themselves. If you've probably done it by themselves, but they must have had some sort of mentoring, some sort of role model, some sort of teaching. I know only a few in my life that I could, and I try to classify them as my friends, because when I look at them, I see, wow, that's an adult. That's an actual adult. They're not 12 anymore. Yeah, they're 55 years old or they're 42 years old, but they're actually 42 years old. They're not. So, and you'll notice this. You'll see once a person gets a bit of pressure, or they get a bit stressed, or you challenge them on something, that normal adult mask just drops away really quick, and you'll see the 10-year-old, you'll see the 6-year-old, you'll see the 14-year-old just come through, and it'll be there until things shift again and they can reform their normal day-to-day mask. It's an amazing thing to see, and that's because we don't have these initiation ceremonies, proper initiations, where the youngster would get taken away by the village. The young boy would be taken away by the males in the village for a number of months and be taught all sorts of activities just with the group of elder men. And the same thing, young girls would be taken away for a few months just to sit with the elder women and hear the stories and learn things and go through the teachings and the tools they're going to need to harmonize that first part of themselves. And we don't have that anymore. We don't get that call. Some say that the French caves with the painted walls, that what those actually were places where boys were initiated into the hunt. That those are actually initiation caves. And so far, I've never had a chance to get into those caves myself to test the energy, but I would be really interesting to see, does it feel like a cave of just artistic expression, or is this a place of powerful initiation? I think it probably is. They went into the initiation, the sons of their mother, and now they came out sons of their father, or in a sense, sons of all of the males of the tribe. To Native Indians, this change for boys would happen through the vision quest. That's where a boy around 12 to 14 years old would be sent on his first fast, sent on his first 3 or 4 day experience of sitting alone in a mountaintop or sitting alone in a place of nature in order for Spirit to give him his vision, to give him his purpose, to give him his knowledge. And David Dida is one of the only ones who has understood the importance of the vision to guide a man's life. What is their purpose? And it's, without question, the most important thing in any man's life. And if they're going to be a true male, you must have a purpose or a vision. And it doesn't have to be a grand thing. It's just this thing that is the core of why you get up in the morning and what it is you want to spend that day producing or creating. You can't just have a purpose, it must be your purpose. And I'm going to talk a lot about this as the video goes on, this important part of purpose. And the same thing, when girls actually get a physical sign when they're ready. Their menstruation first happens, and this is the sign that shows their body is changing. And as their body changes, they're ready to change and already start moving into this adult femalehood. And the teaching, as I say, would not only come from, in this case, from the older women. The older women would teach the young girl how to connect with the earth goddess. They would now learn, well, the male might be moving toward the sun, the father's sun. The woman is moving toward grandmother earth. And the girl is being taught about the giver of life and starting to be learning about the ability to love and create relationship between people and create relationship with all of nature. The intuitive ability to foresee what's going on. These what's called old wives' tales of folklore, those are not like some goofy witches' spells. Those are the intuitive nature that these women would have been learning as young girls from the elder women and the goddess of the earth itself. And at some point, every child is going to have to fly off on their own, and it's part of the job of the parents or society to help them leave. And the modern boy today, as we're going to get into, their focus is on, can they spend 10 hours a day playing video games? And you have to wonder, how did that happen? How did we go in such a short period of time from men finding a purpose and a value in existence to the only value they can find is the time they spend staring at a screen playing video games? So, last thing I want to mention before we get into this is I do want to point out, while this is a big article about masculine and feminine, it's not really about men and women, and it's definitely not a discussion about relationships and marriage. This is about becoming in touch with your masculine and femininity, and that's not the modern idea of marriage. Marriage is really an alchemic term. And it means fusing two metals together, usually gold and silver, or alchemically the sun and the moon. And it's meant to be a mythological quest of understanding reality and understanding the self. So anyone who still thinks a marriage, by its modern term, is some sort of modern love affair is going to get nothing but disappointment. When instead you start seeing it in the alchemic ancient way, which is the masculine and the feminine are allowed to interplay in reality without any societal or religious ideas of what that's supposed to mean. You no longer have some sort of social arrangement. You actually have a spiritual exercise where the yin and the yang, the sun and the moon, which had become separate, are being brought back together to be one of balance, harmony, and a powerful whole. Taking me 35 minutes to get to what we're going to be talking about, but that's what we're going to talk about. So, let's begin the next part of the topic. And I think I'm going to start first with a short overview of masculine and feminine and some of the problems both are facing, and then finish off with the cooperation between the two. I was going to go through Iron John as well, but I think Iron John will have to be a separate article. A separate video. I don't think I'm going to have the time to get into that. So the book, The Boy Crisis, might be on my shelf, is revealing how desperate the situation is for boys and men today. Boys are lost. And what happened back in the 1960s, it was realized that school and education was totally set up in a boy-focused way. And girls were lagging behind drastically in the school system. And things began to be changed in the 60s into the 70s to a place where girls could equally be thriving in the education world. But what's happened is the system has changed so much that now it is girls thrive. Girls are the ones who blow past in the education system, and boys are way behind. The pendulum, which went from all this way, has gone to almost all this way. And now it's boys that are in trouble. In fact, boys in schools today are really seen as, and this is according to the guys in Boy Crisis, as messy, disruptive, bossy, and thus defective girls. And what school really wants to do now is make boys girls with deeper voices. In fact, a book by Hannah Rosen called The End of Men is actually claiming, proudly in her book, claiming that men as an entire gender is about to be eradicated, and that women have moved ahead in almost every area of life. And you may not think that's true, but it actually is. Young women own homes. Young boys don't. Young women actually, in most cases, out-earn men. We talk about this giant wage gap. The wage gap is actually more young women have better jobs, better pay. The reason the wage gap is so out of whack is because you're adding in all the people of society, not just the majority of people on the 0% to 98% scale. You're adding those top 2%, which is people like professional athletes and actors or big corporate executives, which generally are men. And the reason they're men is not necessarily some sort of gender bias, actually. It's because to become a corporate executive, you're going to have to be putting in 80-hour work weeks. You're going to probably have to be semi-psychopathic to crush all of your possible competition. You're going to step on whoever you have to step on, and having a home life or having a life outside of your work office is not there. So to make $10 million a year, that's what you have to do. And no woman who has any femininity in her at all would ever think that not seeing their family or not having a life or not being a part of the world would be a good thing to do. There's no amount of money, there's no job that would be worth it. And so there becomes very, very few females who would be willing to ditch their femininity aside in order to, in a sense, crush that part of their life. So because of that, if you just take a look at a total wage scale, yeah, men outdo women. But particularly in the ages of 20 to 30 years old, it's the women who are getting advantages. It's women that companies want to hire. They want to hire because they're seen as better team players. They're going to be less critical. They're going to get involved in less arguments and problems in the office. They're going to fit in easier. They're going to be more liked. And generally, that woman is more educated than the male. The woman is coming out of her education system with higher grades, higher accolades, and less, we might say, tarnishes on the record. So, of course, young women are doing great. But what's that doing to boys? And what's that doing? And what's it doing to women? Have you taken a good look at women over the age of 30 lately? Have you gone to the grocery store? I mean, don't go into the rich part of town where you're still going to find a whole lot of trophy wives or women who are there to look a certain way. I mean, normal women, the women who just are there. Go to the grocery store. They don't smile anymore. The smiling, sort of semi-joyous woman, I don't see that. Their weight has exploded over the last 10 or 12 years. I mean, I remember even 20 years ago, if you're going to see someone overweight, it was probably going to be a guy. It was probably going to be the typical guy who comes home from work, sits on a couch with 8 beers, watches the football game, and just gets a giant beer gut, and that's what you're going to see. But now the levels of obesity in women is shocking. It's actually shocking, and now there's no difference between who is healthy, who's putting on weight, and who's not. And without question, it has to do with this issue of how our intergenders are fitting into a society that doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? That doesn't value masculine or feminine. It values a very simplistic, robotic attitude. And in fact, the system doesn't like either. And boys are lost. Boys are lost because they see, even if they go apply for a decent job, highly likely the woman's going to get it. The woman's going to get the job. She's better qualified. She's better qualified than the boy. And the boys have lost this, as we're going to see, that this, what is a male reason for even being? One of these things which is, we'll see, called protecting the perimeter, being of value to say that, my area of the world is safe today because I'm in it. Boys don't have that anymore. There's no real reason to have men anymore, other than maybe once in a while, a woman might say, "Can you open this jar of pickles?" I really can't. That's about it. That's about it. That's really about all men are needed for. And so as a young boy who's feeling this at the core of their being and looking ahead at the rest of their life, well, they're lost. And so with no bandits and no animals and no problems to protect the village from, with any physical jobs being lost to robots and technology, so what do? They sit home and they play video games, where the video game gives them the task and responsibility, the goal, the purpose they don't have. Yes, it's very minor. It's finishing something in the game and reach the end and reach a certain point total, but they have a goal and they have expectations of how to get there, responsibilities of what to do. The video game has in many cases replaced a typical male life. And so that's how boys spend their time now. It's even rare in many cases to see boys out really playing, really competing anymore. It's quite sad. You add on top of that the way society is still structured, boys are still taught to pursue the girl. And the main teaching tool that's still left, the main, what would you call it? The main conditioning is that through TV and movies, that the only way you're going to get a woman to like you is, one, if you have money, or two, if you somehow save her from some danger she's been in. That's it. And without either of these, you have no value as a male. And the message still comes out that if you want to go on a date with a woman, well, you'd better pay for it, and you'd better buy them gifts, and you'd better try to show you out-earn her by a large margin. If you're cheap or you're poor, you're unwanted. A guy must fork out the dough if he wants to fork her. And young men know this, and that's a tremendous pressure on them, and they know that the girl sitting across the table might make at least as much money as they do or more, but they're still in the expectation of spending a great amount of money to prove that she should be with them. again, that's another pressure that I think is pushing a lot of men into this, what's it called, this men going their own way thing, where they're deciding they're not going to be with women at all. They're just going to forget the whole idea of relationship completely, which is not a healthy thing to do. It's as unhealthy as when women first started saying, hey, you know what? Men are just treating us like garbage, so why would we want to keep dating these idiots? We're done with them, right? Now it's happening in the reverse. It's men who are believing that the best way to do this is just stay away from women. And again, we're seeing this really bizarre world that's being created. You know, as I say here, who needs a heroic male today when nothing needs to be lifted, nothing needs to be defended from, and now just an appalling apathy of comfort, where no one even wants to show any rebelling to the phone company, the transit authority, and the government. No wonder video games and staring at iPhones are taking over the world. Technology is partly to blame too. Technology has reduced the need for traditional male virtues. There's little for a man to define himself today in a man's world. And we're going to get to the specifics of that. But I also want to get now to this woman I came across. Her name's Anna Rova, and she wrote an article in Medium magazine, I believe it was. It was on feminine power. And she started her article by presenting two pictures of women. And she asked, do you identify as a strong and independent woman? Or do you know any of these women? Do you probably imagine yourself as these? One of them has a red cape and is sort of standing in sort of some beautiful desert area. The other had a globe, was spinning the world in her hand, and had sort of like an invisible muscles or wings to them. And she was very clear to say that has nothing to do with feminine power. She wanted to be very clear that women for thousands of years held an incredible power to influence households, cities, and countries. And they didn't have to spin a world in their hand. They didn't have to wear a red cape. They didn't have to become a man to hold this incredible power. Then she says, if you're a woman who understands her true feminine power and can use it well, you know what I mean. The look in his eyes, the willingness to please you and do anything to win your attention, time, and your presence. His care, his soft touch, his complete surrender to your feminine gifts. The magic that lures him in that he can't even explain. This is just one example of how women can have influence or power over man and society. And so this is also interesting to ask and remind that femininity is somehow presented as weakness. It's somehow presented as not the same as the way a man shows his power, but that's really untrue. The way men show power is through strength and through acquisition and through visible means. Women's power is more unseen. It's more realized after the power has been put in play. You don't see it happen. You don't see it happen while it's happening. And this article is really, really, really good to share some of these ideas of what this invisible feminine power is and what this invisible feminine gift actually is. She then goes on to say, I'm just quoting a couple of pieces from her because it's very useful. Feminine power sits in a woman's hips, her heart, and her womb. So many women today are completely disconnected from the neck down because it is quite unproductive to be in the body. Modern women are disconnected from their hearts and wombs and are constantly in their heads, rationalizing, intellectualizing, strategizing, and being busy. Constantly parking their bodies at desks and boardrooms and meetings, we have lost our touch with our own deeper instinctual knowing as a woman. The essential source of our creativity, intuition, and life force has been cut off. I'm tired of hearing that women do not have power and that we need to be empowered. The truth is that we've always had feminine power that has equal weight as masculine power. Besides, no one can give us or take power away from us because power is internal. We have just, and she says never learned, but I would say stop learning how to use feminine power properly and reap its benefits. And thus, when we had access to all the possibilities and opportunities, we started competing with men. And I think that's a very interesting aspect of this, is this idea that in order for women to fit into the world, they had to start becoming men. And on the surface, that made sense, that if the system wasn't going to change and they wanted to be in the system, well, they had to play the games the system had. But on the other side of that, there was a cost. There was a great toll. A great amount was lost. And that's not saying I think the system as it's been is valuable. The modern society for 200 years is sick. But how we've tried to heal the sick system has actually made the sick system even more sick, and has made human beings into much more unhealthy creatures. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I'll share the article. Link to the article will be below, and you can go, you can go check that out. So without boys having a perimeter to defend, men have also lost their key virtues. Because if you're going to have to potentially defend an entire tribe or defend an area or keep an area safe, you can't do it individually. You need to do it as a group. And this is, I can speak of this, I'll speak of this through my knowledge of hockey, through my knowledge of being a hockey coach and a hockey player. The importance of bonding to have a task, particularly a task that's physical, and a task that has danger presented to it, you need to require certain connection with each other. And for Jack Donovan, he said the 4 main traits in order for that to happen are strength, courage, mastery of a skill, and most importantly, what would be called honor. Honor meaning commitment, honesty, the moral virtue, and the ability to follow one's word. And I'm not saying women don't have these qualities as well. Of course they do, but it's that these values would be absolutely at the top of the scale of what would a male in these situations value another male for. And there's no question, as a hockey player, I'm looking at the guy sitting beside me, well, he better be strong and courageous, because if I need someone to help me in the corner, I don't want him to get pushed around and if someone else come out with a puck. If I'm getting beaten up in the corner, I don't want him standing there watching me get beat up. He better get in and help me out, and he better be able to handle it if he does. I want him to have mastery of skills. Of course I do. He's got to be able to do something well. He's got to be able to, whether pass the puck, shoot the puck, play defense, win face-offs. He's got to do something. And I got to know they're committed, that they're going to be at practice every day, that they're going to work hard, that they're not going to lie to me or the team, and that when they say something, they mean it. That when they say they'll be there and they're going to work and they're going to do it, they're going to do it. So that's a small scale of what would be required on a much bigger field. So to me, that's how I know what he's presenting in this area. It's quite correct. There are some things Jack presents that I don't agree with at all, but this little core I agree with pretty much 100%. And for this to happen, you can't, a male can't learn these skills of bonding with other women around. He just can't. There's like the key things that a woman will define another woman by. And I don't actually know what that is. Only other women will know. What are the key values a woman will define another woman by? But skills like this for males, you can only learn that together with other males. That's because that's who you're being tested against. That's who you're learning it from. So as soon as everything becomes integrated, you lose the ability for those what would be foundational parts of male interaction to happen. That's the best way I can describe it. You lose it just won't happen. And it would be the same. There are certain things women need to learn just by being only around women, and just being around girls, and that they have to get through all sorts of challenges and problems together without men and boys getting in the way. And now with these things being lost, where everything has to be integrated, you've got this problem. And again, I'm not saying that men can't do things that would be normally females can't do with normally men. What's important is that we still have places and times where we have the ability to learn what it is to be male ourselves, and women have the ability to learn what's being feminine themselves, because that's how it was in the ancient world. The ancient world had these initiation places and these specific times when it was time to have skills. And I can remind you that men need to have practical skills. That's another good one. You need to have a practical skill. I mean, women should have an automatic practical skill that should be taught from the moment they're born, and that's raising a child properly. I mean, that's a skill beyond any skill, actually. There's no more important skill than that. And unfortunately, the way the world's set up, first of all, women don't treat motherhood as being anything special anymore. They don't really treat it as being something sacred. And it's just, how quick can I get back to work? As opposed to, I'm actually got an opportunity to perfect a skill, perfect my most important skill. Men can't have that skill. We have to learn, we have to have something else. And men need something practical, need something that on a day-to-day basis makes where you are better and improved, whether it's building something, fixing something, working with something. I mean, I had no practical skills, or almost none. I learned how to play hockey and baseball, partially because I had no proper role model in my life, no male role model to say, hey, you know what? It might be really good for you if you learned how to fix cars, or it might be really useful for you if you learned how to build a couple of things. Somewhere down the road in your life, you're going to need to do that. So it'd be good to have learned it and not have to ask somebody else to do it all for you. And again, that doesn't mean you have to build your own house or hunt your own food or whatever, but it is interesting to see that how few men have learned any of these practical skills. And by the same token, yeah, a practical skill you can learn. A man can learn how to sew. A man can learn how to harvest plants. There's nothing wrong, or it just something. It doesn't have to be male practicality necessarily. You might be drawn to whatever it is you're drawn to, but it's still, you need to have a skill. Just like a woman can get the practical skills of learning how to build a chair or fire a bow and arrow. It's not a problem with that. But the masculine part of us needs a skill that is ours. And guys, just so you know, shooting off sperm is not a practical skill. That's just an aspect of the body. Now, you might say a practical skill would be learning how to take the woman you're with into the depths of orgasmic experience. Because a male has one firing, you might say. Okay, we can have more than one, of course, experience, but that's really it. But the woman needs to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Brought into deeper and deeper and deeper sexual experience. And that's a skill. That's a skill that a male can learn. And again, if you're playing video games all day and masturbating and spending it watching porn, you're not going to be learning exactly how to take a woman into the depths of her experience. And I guarantee you, if a woman is really feminine, if she's really feminine, how much you earn will be nowhere near as important as the depths you can take her in your sexual experiences. Guaranteed. And bizarrely, in this case, this is an area where a male can't teach you. Another male can't teach you how to do that. You actually need. I was lucky when I was younger. I dated a lot of older females when I was 20 years old. So I dated women in their 30s, and it was through them that I learned. They were encouraging. They were helping me see what I was doing that was well, what I was doing that was poor. I was gaining confidence. I was removing things that would just be boyish stupidity and gain this knowledge. And that's a really good example of the opposite, where the female can teach the male and the male can teach the female in all sorts of other aspects. It's some aspects that can't happen, other areas that's vital. And I just want to pass that along. I should have talked one more thing about the power of the feminine on the male. And I'll bring up a story now. Wow, I've already been talking for an hour. And that is that a true female attracts masculinity automatically. Just boom. And back when I was a comedian, and I was doing a show in a small town in Saskatchewan, and it was going to be in a fairly large bar. It was going to hold about 200 people who were going to come in at the course of the night. This is about a half hour before the show. And it was mostly guys who were in there early, playing pool, I guess. The girls were going to be coming later, as it turned out. And so there's maybe 50 or 60 people, and I'm there kind of getting ready for the show, thinking about my act. And all of a sudden, I noticed my head just turned for no reason, just like turned to the door. There was no logical reason why I did it. And I noticed two women had just walked in. And one was nice looking and whatever, but the other one, it wasn't so much that she was how attractive she was. It was later I realized is how feminine she was. This woman could embody femininity. And yes, she was, of course, she was attractive, but it was beyond that. And when I kind of got that sense and I looked around the room, I was just curious. Every other guy in the room had turned to look at her. It was incredible. It was as if her femininity was like a magnet, and every head, and again, had nothing to do with what she looked like specifically. I've known this in a lot of cases. It's not what a woman looks like. The power of how feminine she is what makes a woman to the next level of attractive. I've met a lot of women that on the surface look really nice, but they are so, I don't want to say unfeminine, that's not the word, because they have femininity. They're so not in touch with it, and they're so blocked off from it that you can't possibly be actually attracted to them, even though facially they look nice. If you saw a picture of them, you'd say, oh yeah, she looks good, and then you meet her and you just, I don't want to continue talking to this person. It would be the same, I guess, for women. You can meet a really nice looking guy, and as soon as he starts talking out of his ass like an idiot, well, hopefully you don't want to talk to the guy anymore. But it was just interesting. Every head turned in this case. And there was just a power in this. And, okay, I'll finish the story. And so I knew they were standing talking at the door, and I realized they must be trying to decide, do they pay the $7 or $8 and come in, or do they want to go somewhere else? And so I thought, I should go up there. So I walked past, and I just casually, we're still having this discussion at the door. And I remember just whispering to this girl as I walked by, I hear the comedians really suck. If I were you, I'd go somewhere else. And gave her a wink. Walked out, because I normally walk out to be in the fresh air and prepare my show anyway. And as I walked out, and I sort of took a quick look back, and she was just smiling at me as I walked out. And I saw her pay the money and come in. And as the night went on, we did meet and get together and spend time together, and just, as it turned out, it was just physically being around her was healthy. It was like a healthy dose of power into my being. I can't explain it. It's not like I was taking anything from her. I don't mean it like that. It was like an energy stealing thing. It was just the strength of her femininity, and the willingness that she wanted to share that with me. It's like an energy or a power in my body just surfaced. And it was an incredible joy just to sit with her. It's a long story. I don't want to go into it here, but it's just an example of how, for example, this unseen feminine power can influence a lot of things that Anna was talking about. And yeah, so back to this. So I'm going to, at this point, because we're getting close to the end of this here, I'm not going to get to the man's purpose yet, which is a really important element to understand. I'm going to go to the cooperation element. Now, the cooperation of the male and the female, how that works, a lot of this I learned from this guy, this Tan Maris, and then I'll get back to finish with some other aspects of masculinity and femininity and purpose and whatnot. So So this is, again, how masculine and feminine combines together for grander purpose. And this also is a reminder of not just as male-females working together, this is also how the inner masculine and the inner feminine combine together within each side of us. And a male works with the inner female and getting to know it by the use of an external female mirror to see the state of our own inner female. And the inner male will use an external, and the inner female will use an external male to see the state of their inner male. And like everything, it's manifesting as a male human or a female human is really just a particular state of awareness. And that connects us to an inner potentiality. Masculinity, which to him is the void, femininity, which is the womb. And what's interesting, by doing the opposite, with men becoming more feminine and women becoming more masculine, we're missing our key core being, our key core, not spiritual, but deeper ability, our deeper potential in the dream is being lost. So the male has in a sense, a physical manifested link to enter and exit the void easily. Women can enter the void as well, but he claims they have a more difficult time returning to the current dream state, to the current reality. And I've seen a bit of that women are outstanding dreamers, but they can sometimes get locked in the dream. You have to sometimes help bring them out. And no matter what, when you enter the void, as happened with me in the canyon, when I had my death experience, on one level it's frightening. It's an abyss. But the abyss beckons masculinity. Masculinity wants to go into the abyss. And the problem is that conditioning has been teaching males for a long, long time that they have to be completely rational, that they must follow their logical mind. But in the void, there is no logic. Logic doesn't work in the abyss. And so because of that, men can easily feel helpless. I mean, we're drawn to the void, but we're taught to be logical and strong thinking, but the very place we're being drawn to, we're not allowed to think. And because of this, a male must take the lead, because in the void there are no guides. So you're going to feel alone, and the logical mind is gone, and you're going to have to learn how to lead yourself into and out of the void. Only the unknown can be of help in the void, and that is where the male who has taken the lead must get help from his inner female, because it is the inner female that touches the unknown. And so it's that inner female that's going to give you the direction that's required once you're in the void. But once a male, particularly through the schooling system, taught to ignore the feminine intuitive knowledge because it's not logical and it's all feeling, the male throws away all of their opportunities. So therefore the male must identify with wisdom as a female. Sophia is wisdom. Be it a woman or be it the world. And you must see what the wisdom is bringing and allow the women or the world to bring it in the way they want to bring it, not in the way your rational mind wants it to be. Women intuitive knowledge does not come logically. It comes through feeling, and it comes through what comes in a different way. If a male turns away from that, he will become helpless. And once a male becomes helpless, he calls forth mother. Mother being the masculine aspect of the female. See, this is one thing that also is very confusing. I almost should go back and redo the whole video, because some of the stuff I'm saying right now should be like at the beginning. Ugh. A male generally, has an inner male and an inner female. The inner female and male are relatively separate in the male. The male is very dominant. The inner female doesn't often arise. The inner woman has the inner female, the feminine, and the inner masculine, which is actually will surface, it's known as mother, mom. Mom to her children is masculine, because mom is in control. Mom will tell the child, if necessary, what to do and how to do it for their well-being, right? She's not bullying them. She's She's using her masculine energy in that way. And so women have easier access to masculine and feminine. Actually, men have a harder time accessing feminine because feminine is something we tend to only get into when we're in the void, when we're moving into the realm outside of the dream, when we're taking apart reality and trying to understand the absolute. That's one of the only times we're really delving into the feminine, or when we're really understanding what's going on in our reality. But a female has this access because anytime she needs to be in any kind of charge, of course she's being masculine, and that's mom role. But if a man gets helpless, mom is called immediately. A true female balances the true male, and in fact supports the male, just like you'll always see Hathor in ancient Egypt supporting Horus. Again, the idea that women are weak is a complete misrepresentation of the powerful feminine quality to support a lead. A woman must feel it's a great honor to be a female, because a woman 2 days before her period actually opens a crack and goes into another world. Thus, they have an advantage men don't have. It's why boys had to go on the vision quest. Boys had to go on this vision quest to find their purpose and find their knowledge. They actually had to break away from the world. Women, every month, have granted a smaller experience in a vision quest. They have their own minor vision quest, month after month after month. And in fact, in the ancient villages, the women would be separated from the village, where they would have no chores to do. They would sit with the other women who were going through the same moon time, and they would have the ability to let this period of time come into their consciousness, the dreams and the knowledge and the wisdom come into their consciousness, and then return to the village with what they've shared and what they've understood. And that's nothing the way women are treated today. That's treated as something they'd better start taking some pharmaceutical drugs for so they can keep going to work. Imagine if the world understood that this was a continuous, important part of a woman's ability to access knowledge, and we want to give them the time, month after month after month, to do this so that they can access this knowledge. How different the world would be, and how different women would be if something like that was being honored. I just want to share that. But this idea of true females, of learning how to be a woman first, because of this dual nature, her masculine principle, mother, the one she uses with children, and female, the one she uses with the world. And the female can shift the role at any time. For example, if a woman starts her own business, she's in mom role. But if a woman makes all decisions in a marriage, she's in the mom role. And that is one of the biggest issues in modern relationships. The husband has become a little boy, the feminine part of the male. The feminine part of the male that's the best way, the boy. The boy is not a man yet. The boy is still all feminine, or highly feminine. And women get tired of having to be a mom to their husband. And the man gets constantly tired of being told what to do by mom because he's a little boy. It's why men usually if they're going to have an affair, they have an affair with a younger woman who's less likely to mother them. Well, women will usually have an affair with a more masculine man, either one who's younger, more virile, or an older, more established male, one she's not going to have to tell what to do. And a lot of what might be called, Stan Mara's talking, a lot of what he described as male violence against women comes from men simply being little boys rebelling against mommy. They haven't been able to step into their maleness, and as soon as a woman responds to that, because there must be masculinity in the world the way the world is running, and if the male doesn't bring up masculinity, the female's forced to. The female, it's actually this higher masculinity in females is not a female problem, it's a male problem. As more masculinity, as more true male is lost, the female has to try to save and support this area by becoming more masculine, by bringing mom out. And in fact, the world is taken over by the mother. People think this is a male-dominated world. This is one of the big misunderstandings. They think it's a male-dominated society now. No, it's a masculine, feminine, mother-dominated society. Ishtar. the Babylonian goddess, is really who runs the world now, energetically. The world is constantly telling you what to do, how to do it, when to put your shoes on, when to get in your car, when you can do this, where you can do that. That's mom. And mom runs the world now. And it's supposed to be a balance between the true male and the true female, the masculine and the feminine together, sharing what's supposed to go on. Look carefully. You'll see the entire system we live in is this masculine aspect of the female. And it's a pretty ingenious way of doing it. If you think about it, even sports, I mean, masculinity is gone from sports now. That's been sucked out. You're not allowed to fight. You're not allowed to have bad behavior. And what's most important, you're not supposed to compete. You're just supposed to go out and have fun. Winning or losing doesn't matter. Just do your best. Doesn't matter. And if you're going to just play, if you're going to just play a little in your backyard with your friends or just have some athletic activity, like equivalent of gym, yeah. But sports was a part of masculine training. It was the preparation for the next thing that's going to come, which might mean some of you are going to die. You know, I don't want, if a wild animal's charging into the village, I don't want the guy that's first in line wondering, I'll just do my best. I'll just wave my sword a couple times and see what happens. I want someone who's going to know what to do, know how to do it, and will die in the process doing his job. But that's not the world we have today. And basically, it's being sucked out of everything, including sports. And our healthy civilization is going with it. The inner female wants to merge with her inner male. We're going to talk about the female now. Remember, a male acts, the male fertilizes, the woman conceives. The woman conceives. And women need a male to take what can be seen as chaotic and turn it into powerful direction. This is Stan Mars talking, and I really agree with this. He says that the male inner female and the external female needs to be contained. It needs to be put into one purpose. Because the feminine has power, as the world is feminine. The whole world we know of is feminine. So the world is everything. The nothing is the male, the nothingness you might say is male, and the everything is female in the spiritual balance. And the problem with everything is, if you're focused on everything, well, nothing ever gets done. And so part of the male job on a bigger scale is to provide the purpose or the lead of where things are supposed to go. And that doesn't mean a woman is weak in any way by providing a lead. On the contrary, a woman who can do that will find enormous power, because now she doesn't have to fight, she doesn't have to force herself. The direction is clear, and she can now go inside for the most powerful inner guidance, so that both of them can know how to handle the direction better, correctly. The male is now going to listen to the female and to what she brings, because he knows now they're on the same track, they're on the same direction. So whatever she brings him is going to be valuable. If you don't know the direction you're going, if there's 80 different directions, and you feel like you want to go this one, but you still have 80 directions on the table, then the information is just going to come to you, most of it useless. And a woman has the ability, the more direct, focused she feels that the masculine in her life is, and again, we're not talking male-female necessarily, this is her own inner masculinity. The more focused her own inner masculinity is into where she wants to go, the more her inner feminine is going to bring the correct pieces of information that need to be used. And that's how this balance is being created. The male's not going to force, he's not going to push, but a true male initiates. He starts the discussion. He initiates and moves things in a particular way. He brings the women into his space as an equal. Otherwise, the male's just going to fight her. The male's going to try to dominate the women in his life. But when you bring them in by not trying to dominate and not acting helpless, you're providing the direction to have the female birth in the right information and the right experiences that are required. So a male can't become a coward, and he can't become a brute. Otherwise, you'll be ineffective as a male. You'll just be trying to manipulate them, frighten them, or run away from them. And it doesn't mean if a female lets a male take the lead that she's going to agree with the direction or she's going to agree with the method being used. What she's doing is getting the male to find what's right for them together. Of course, as we talk about purpose, the more the male knows his purpose and the more the male knows his inner vision, there'll be less of this bickering back and forth, because either then, once the male knows his vision, the women, he'll attract a woman that supports the vision. It'll be just that simple. If a woman doesn't support the vision or doesn't want to support that direction, if she wants something else, then that's fine, but you're not going to go somewhere else. And a woman should also instantly be able to recognize, is this a direction I want to support or not? So if the male has no direction, the woman is confused, because if she's got 10 guys with no direction, well, who does she follow? She's got to she picks one kind of and tries to force a direction on him, as opposed to if you got 10 guys with 10 different directions, each one knows what their goal and their values are. She knows who she wants to be with. That's only natural. And once she knows that, once she doesn't have to worry about the direction and the purpose, she's free. She's free to concentrate on what's needed in the present moment to search the depths of the unknown. That is her power. That is her incredible power. She, in a sense, can hunt the extra information she and the male needs. Thus, the male contains the direction of her search so that she can go into the search in incredible depth. If a woman tries to use femininity to lead, then she gets lost. It's very hard to explain. I've seen it play out in my life, and I would have to sit here for another hour or two telling stories of how I could show that in my life. In a simple way, the female has a way to take the events of the day and show how they all work in detail and information for what's going on. In traditional, the old 1950s world, right? All the men worked. They came home at the end of the day. They'd sit down at the table, and the women would want to tell them what goes on, what happened in the day, where the cat went, what the dog did, what the kids did, what the neighbors said, and the male would be like, "Why are you telling me all this? I just want to rest. I've had a busy day. Just let me rest and eat my dinner." The male is not being masculine, because if he's being truly masculine in a set of key direction, and the woman is being truly feminine, he knows that she's not telling him this to waste his time. There's 100 things that happened in the day, but she's indicated 4 or 5 things might be of value, might be useful. A really good example I gave once would be a man, let's say in a male case, the male's an architect. I'm using this traditionally, but this is just to get the point across. The male's an architect, and he's got to have a new building done the next day. He's got to have some new architectural plans done. And he's working really hard, and his wife finally comes in and says, "Honey, why don't you go take a break? You said you were going to watch the videos of our friend's wedding, and because you couldn't make it, and you said you'd watch them with me tonight. Why don't we watch the video?" And normally the male will just say, "Don't you see I'm busy? I've got to get this done. I'm 9 o'clock in the morning. This has to be on the boss's desk. Why are you wasting my time?" But if he's really masculine and really knows his direction and really trusts the feminine that he's with, he's going to say, "Okay, she knows this is important. She knows I have to get this done. She's not doing this to waste my time. She's got another reason. Maybe the reason is she just knows he needs to take a break. And just by taking a break will be enough to clear his mind and finish the job." But it can also be they sit down, and if he focuses on he's going to take time to watch this video, he might notice in some area in the back of one of the images is the exact answer to the building problem he needed. Kind of like, that's it. That's what I need to build. This building, stop the tape. That right there. But if he wouldn't have listened to the feminine impulse of, "I don't know exactly what you need, but I know potentially by doing this you'll get it," he would have lost his opportunity. I hope this is making sense, because it's very, very hard to try to explain in simple terms, and until you've lived it a little bit is the only way you can actually see this play out. And this is a key part of this cooperation. A woman seeks a man who has found his power. And part of this comes through a woman dreaming, her fantasy. Sure, every woman dreams of being a princess, being swept off their feet by some radiant knight, but within the dream is a deep secret of the female. And belief is powerful. If a man has a woman who insists on seeing him and expecting him to be a shining knight, the true male will have no option but to either live up to that belief or become a total jerk or get out of her life. But if a woman doesn't have this powerful dream, there's nothing to push the male into becoming greater. A lot of men and women, they try to change. They try to forcefully change their partner, as opposed to, can they dream their partner into the deepest power they can have, into the deepest being they can become. So remember, the male has to incorporate the female and incorporate what she can bring into his life, and the female must incorporate the male and allow the male to bring what's important into their life. Without it, you get this incredible disconnect. The male will just want to go alone, watch TV, and ignore his woman, and the woman will just not share anything anymore and forget about providing any details to the male, and things will die. The garden, the plants in the garden need water, they need sunlight, they need care, they need focus, they need soil, and the proper cooperation between men and women is that. There's a lot more here I can talk about this topic of, for example, the way competition between men is not really competing with each other to try to be better than each other, but it's really about pushing each other to be as good as they can be. That you don't want to, the sick male wants to dominate other males, to push them down, to be better, while a true male wants to compete with them to show what can be done. If you do this, if you work harder, if you change this aspect of something, if you add this skill, you'll be as good as I am. And that's part of it. Is the competition is to raise man up, not to push yourself to the top and push everyone down. Real competition is and it's, again, it's a giant long chapter piece of it, but I've been talking for an hour and a half. So I just want to go into a couple of small details before I'll end this. Let you go back to your lives and as such. So I'm going to go here because I don't know when the battery or the capacity of this camera I have will end. So if it just cuts off at some point, I've run out of memories. So no, I'll get to this point first. And this comes from David Dida, who is one of the only ones I think who's really understood this idea of purpose and vision in a male's life. A true male is not fully masculine until he has a purpose, the reason for being here. It can be something very simple, giving his children a better future. It can be something quite grand and difficult. There's a man in a Ben Fogley Into the Wild program who became the personal protector of the entire ocean off the Cambodian coast, even though that meant being shot at daily by illegal Vietnamese fishermen. But that purpose he had took his entire focus, his entire life, his entire being to protect the ocean. And when you met his family, the woman he was with, you could just see how these incredible, powerful feminine qualities that were in total support of what he was doing. And they were an unbelievable team in how they were putting this together. And his kids, more importantly, his children, they all looked centered, awake, clear. All of his children, he had men, he had boys and girls. They were clear and awake and centered. And that was because he had a purpose, he was following it. He had a woman who believed in his purpose and was going to support that purpose. And the children were being raised in an unbelievably strong, nurturing environment. Those kids have an unbelievable chance. And again, that's why young boys would go on this vision quest. And it was important for them to find what their purpose was. And it's not the purpose they might want or wish for. You know, I told a story once of, a native Indian, he wants to be a hunter. He's spending all his time, he wants the name Running Bear, and he wants to be out in the hunt. But every time he goes in the hunt, he always messes it up. In fact, he almost gets some of the other older warriors killed. But this is what he wants. This is his vision. This is what he wishes. This he wishes his vision was. But the others around the tribe started noticing, but, when one of us gets hurt, he knows where to go in the forest to get the right plants so that we can heal right away. He knows where to go, and he knows where the food is, actually. He can find it immediately. He has this incredible power. That's his gift, for example. That would be his power. He needs to stop wanting to be running bear and move into his power of, green thumb or something. And this is a part of what the vision quest is meant to do. Take us away from what we wish we would be, what we wish we would do, and say, here it is. Your vision and your purpose. And it's not necessarily something grand and spectacular. You're not there to save the world. You're there to do something small that fits into the world as a whole. And this small thing fits your heart. It energizes you to do it. Even though, something grander would be cool, this is what makes you happy. That's a part of what the vision is all about. And like I say, generally, a masculine essence is moving towards freedom. How does my action create more freedom for myself and for others? More consciousness, more awareness for myself and others. Well, a feminine-based priority will be about relationship, the flow of love, the ability to connect, the ability to have relationship between people and between nature. A man will never be able to truly be intimate with someone else and feel closeness or love with them unless they have their mission on track. And I don't mean that as a specific job or a specific career. I mean, whatever their underlying reason for being is. A natural feminine core, this is David Dida, and I agree with him, a feminine core is fulfilled and stress released through love and relationship. Males have their stress released by aligning with their mission. The more their mission is on target, the less stress they're going to feel, even if it's difficult. Intimacy to a male is something in addition to, not above the purpose. And again, don't get too bogged down in the idea of purpose or mission or whatever. It's the direction, the deepest direction a male wants to work into the world. And this is going to sound harsh, but for a male, the women in their life are replaceable. It's very harsh, but men know if you lose the woman you're currently with, you can get another one. Or not. It's not important, because the priority or the mission is important. And as long as you are on your correct purpose, you will attract the right kind of women who will want to support that purpose with you. Because a male on his own will have a hard time bringing that purpose to total power, to total completeness. An outer feminine is needed to connect with that purpose, birth it, you might say, and make it grow. Just like a true feminine woman will have no intimacy if she's only focused on an exterior purpose or a goal, something that she herself feels that she wants. Because if she ignores the connection of love, and she ignores the mission of relationship, she will also never be happy. And the male knows that with the right purpose, the right women will come in. And if it's not the right woman, that's fine. The purpose will always win out over the woman. And that's where it can get a little tricky, because the women can focus on the relationship more than making sure the purpose gets fulfilled. And that's why it's partially a male's job to know their purpose, bring in a woman who will support it, and not create problems down the road. Women grow relationships, and in fact they grow life. And that's part of their power, the energy of intimacy, of pleasure, of vitality that flows through the woman. The story I told you of being with, I don't want to say her name, the woman that I met in Saskatchewan that day, the vitality flowed from her. It was in me. It didn't come from her, you might say. But just her being, just the way she was, initiated my energetic response. right? Energy, just by her being. That's part of women's natural function. It's also interesting, man. If you ever happen to be in if a coffee shop ever opens again, who knows what this screwed up world we're in, but let's say a coffee shop can open again, and you can actually just sit there and nobody's got helmets on their heads and sitting with 8,000 layers of clothing to protect themselves from getting a cold. But pretend we have this ability, and you see an attractive woman on the other side of the room. Don't start thinking about how you can meet her, how you can date her, how you can go out with her. Just don't try to meet her at all. Just know that she's in your presence, especially if she's very feminine. I'm talking about someone who exudes a feminine quality, really strong femininity. Again, it's not what she looks like, it's the attractiveness of the femininity. And just allow it to be there. Allow yourself to touch it externally. Just sit where you are, but feel the presence of that feminine energy. You'll notice, almost guaranteed, you're going to feel stronger and more centered, more balanced. Guaranteed. Absolutely guaranteed. I was going to do an experiment at some point, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. But at some point I might do an experiment and do a video on it. It'd be the same thing for a woman. If you're in a coffee shop and, wow, there's a truly masculine male there. Don't worry about meeting him. Don't try to acknowledge him. Don't try to make any, just in a sense, ignore it, other than there's true masculinity in your sight, in your area. Can you connect with that energy? How do you feel? How do you feel? How much power can you feel? How much vitality can you feel in your system? And do you notice, if he's noticed you, do you feel vitality flowing in his body? Just an experiment. But this is part of what's going on. And again, the men needed this vision quest. The men needed to get their purpose and needed to get it early. I really wish, again, I could have, the medicine men that I got to know, I didn't get to know them until I was in my 30s. And I wished I could have got to know them when I was 10, 12 years old and had them say when I was, 13, okay, time to get out in the forest and sit here for 5 days. Why? Why am I doing that? Because you have to know who you are and what you're going to be doing here. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your time. I would have saved a tremendous, even with such a poor male role model, to have been able to have connected to someone like the native medicine men that I got to know and who could have got my purpose laid down when I was 12 or 13, would have made the rest of my life unbelievably easier, because I would have known what I needed to do. I would have known, do I need to go to college? Do I need to go to university? Do I need to just learn a trade from somebody? Do I need to learn to read books? Do I need to practice this? Do I need to become a healer? You would have known early on.